Hey there, to be honest, I'm sorry that you had to click on this video because you either are a person who has no knowledge about housing in the Netherlands and wants to understand more about it, or are a person who already went through this process and knows how difficult it can be, so you want to prepare ahead of it. Because of this, actually, I'm glad that you clicked on this video because I know exactly what you need to do to find your next housing. As a third-year student in Groningen, I lived in 4 different places in my first year of university and in 6 different places in the last 3 years. Reason for why today I want to tell you about the strategy that I have created that my friends and I have used countless times in the past to find housing for ourselves. Over the past couple of years, the Netherlands decided to market themselves to students from abroad to study in their country. Reason for why there has been an increasing demand for student homes. Based on multiple research studies, it is claimed that since 2011, the number of international students has more than doubled from 54,000 in 2011 to 128,000 in 2024. And what is even crazier to put into perspective is that 40% of first-year students in 2024 were internationals. This massive growth in the student population has simply broken the housing market. Reason for why in the past couple of years there have been major headlines that even Dutch students can't find housing in their own country. Also, what is interesting is that not only in the bigger cities in the Netherlands we've seen this uptrend, like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht or The Hague, but also in smaller cities like Groningen, Eindhoven, Tilburg and many more. So if you were thinking about deciding on which city you want to study in the Netherlands, maybe it would make more sense to decide on a smaller city to pay less for the rent fees. But later on in this video, I'm gonna tell you about a strategy that you can use to avoid this problem and be able to study in the city of your choice. Now that you understood why the Netherlands is going through such a terrible crisis, you need to learn what are the housing options that you can choose from and what are the prices for each one of those in different cities. As a student, these are the following options that you are gonna need to choose from: a room, a studio, or an apartment. Now, to be able to understand all of them and understand the differences between them, I'm gonna explain you what a studio is. A studio is a room where you have your own kitchen and your own private bathroom. And a room is a studio where you don't have your own personal kitchen and or bathroom. And an apartment is a studio where you simply have more bedrooms. Very important, in the Netherlands, it's very popular to live in shared apartments or student complexes, as it comes out way more cost effective for your monthly rent. What this means is that in student complexes, you might share your kitchen with 6 to 8 other people and also the bathroom. While living in a shared apartment, you probably are going to be splitting the bathroom and the kitchen with maximum to 3 to 4 people. This is why when we will go over the strategy, the first thing you will need to do when starting to search for housing is look for student complexes like SSH, Xior, and many more. But let's not get ahead because you still need to understand how much it would cost you to live in these different types of housings. I want you to understand that the prices I'm going to mention in this video are based on square meter averages in each geographical area in the Netherlands. So now I want you to focus on one main thing that will make you understand why prices are so expensive. In 2024, there have been 4 different cities from the Netherlands in the top 10 most expensive cities to rent in Europe. And this is because of a simple concept called supply and demand. Now, I want you to guess in your head and put it in our comments below. What do you think is the average of people applying for one single housing in the Netherlands in 2024? 3, 2, 1. The number is 40. 40 different people, which to me, when I heard this for the first time, seemed insane, but it also made so much sense. In 2024, sadly, the market for housing is incredibly imbalanced for landlords, making them free to charge premium rents, as there's always gonna be someone who would be willing to pay that amount. Now, here are the numbers that you need to remember for yourself. Per square meter, on average, you would need to pay 19.28 euros to find a place anywhere in the Netherlands. This is an average, where of course in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, the prices are way higher on average than maybe in a smaller village, for example, close to Groningen. Because I know that all of these things can be very overwhelming for the first time, we wrote an ebook where you have all of this information and the best strategy that we are going to be talking later on in this video with the actual applied ways to do it. Also important to mention that for all of the 6 housing that I lived in so far, I have used these strategies that I have made better and better over the years. And one last thing before we are going to be discussing about strategy is for you to understand utilities. When you will check an apartment on the internet, a lot of the listings will mention clearly that either they have utilities included or excluded in the price that you see. But there's places where this is not specified, and I want you guys all, when you're talking with the landlord for the first time, if this is not particularly clear to you, to ask this question, because utilities can get up to from 150 euros per month to even 300 in different places. And that is a drastic difference from maybe paying 500 euros initially to 800 after utilities. These utilities most of the time will range from gas, water, electricity, and internet. And if you don't have utilities included, many times you will have to do your own contract, which can be very difficult for the first time. Now let's discuss the strategy that I have been talking about so far. In the beginning, I mentioned that I have moved for 4 times in my first year. And because of this, I had to understand many different ways to find housing. This varied from private housing agencies, housing websites, housing complexes, and even Facebook groups. But these are not the only options that you have when you're searching for housing. So let's go over what I would do if I was searching for housing in 2025. First, it's very important for you to understand what is your budget for renting in the Netherlands. Based on this, it will make more sense to follow different strategies. So now what I want you to do is ask your parents for what is the limit they have in case of the housing rent and overall for your stay in the Netherlands. Because in my personal experience, in my first year when I'm moving here, I didn't find any housing in the 400 to 600 range. And I had to pay over 900 euros for a studio apartment for myself for the first 6 months of staying here. If you're looking for a personal studio or apartment, I would recommend you contact a couple of private agencies from your city. By contacting a private housing agency, it will make your whole experience way less stressful because they will be there for you and probably are gonna find you a housing way faster. But because they are gonna find you a housing faster and stress-free, they're gonna ask you for a lot of housing taxes for their services. And these fees can go up from 500 euros to even 1,000 euros for finding a successful apartment, like being able to live in one apartment and paying for all of the fees from beforehand. Now, I assume most of you want to go as cheap as possible, which I understand because that was my situation too. Before we start the whole search and the housing websites and the different options that you have, I want you to clearly understand that you would need to start searching for housing 3 months in advance. So if you have less time now, I still think you can use these tips that I'm giving you, but I think it would be really great if you would be 3 months ahead at least. Okay, now that we understand what is the maximum amount of money that you are able to pay, you need to think about the area of search. This might sound a bit weird to you because when you're moving to Amsterdam, let's say you are trying to find housing in Amsterdam, right? Well, no, actually. Because what would be smart to do is search also for different villages or different cities around Amsterdam. Because if you search for a house in a village, for example, the prices are going to be way lower. And also you're probably gonna be able to find a bigger house for the amount of money that you're paying for. And this was exactly the case of one of the people we have talked with in the past. Now that you have decided where you want to live, you need to think about the student housing complexes where you could be moving in. Most of these student complexes in general put out their housing in May. And they're probably putting out their housing somewhere in the fall if you're trying to move in from the second semester in February. So now that you understood when you can do this, you need to know what a student complex is. So a student complex in general, you can imagine it as a big building that was built or was bought by quite a big company. And they're renting out hundreds of rooms in one single place. And in this area, what they're doing to make it profitable is that they create like one big kitchen and a one big bathroom, and then they link 10 to 12 houses to that particular bathroom and that particular kitchen. And these companies most of the time rent out their housing for a short stay, which is 6 months, or a long stay for 1 year. The benefits are that you're paying less because you're sharing a space with many different people. But then the disadvantages that I was talking about are also quite substantial. What this means is that you don't have a private bathroom or a private kitchen, which can be very unpleasant. Also, what is one other downside of the student complexes is that they're very limited. Now that we have moved around from housing complexes, it starts the moment where you need to actually do something. Now we are going to be talking about housing websites, and these are the most well-known ones by anyone who's moving to the Netherlands. And you are hearing like names like Kamernet, Pararius, Funda, Huurwoningen. These are the websites that we personally would recommend you use because we have used them in the past and we had success with them, but we are not promising that you're gonna find something with them. When you're starting initially your search with like 3 months before or 2 months before, we recommend you use something like Pararius or Huurwoningen because they have either a deal for like 2 weeks for free, or on Pararius you can use it for completely free to apply for different housing. Now these housing of course are from agencies most of the time, so not private landlords. And what this means is that the process of you finding finding something is a bit more challenging because some of these housing agencies actually ask you for money. Now that we have talked about Pararius, I want to tell you about Kamernet and Hoerwoningen. These are websites where you need to pay a fee. And what I would recommend you to do is use these like 1 month ahead of you moving in. And what you are gonna be doing is sending like 100 to 200 messages, like literally to anyone, like even up to that 800 maximum. Because what you're trying to do is go for as many different options, as many different doors, and then hope for a couple of them to open up for the viewing and then be able to get the place. So the benefits really are that there's a lot of different options. Like on Kamernet, you can find hundreds of different places depending on the city, and also on Pararius and the Funda and the Hoerwoningen. But also you need to be aware of possible scammers. We have many different videos about this on our social medias, and I'm going to be getting back into this in a future video probably. But what you need to look out for is like very fishy names, bad use of English, and also if they're asking for any contract or any money, you know that those are scams. Also, because there are so many benefits, there are also quite big downside. The downsides are that there's very high competition. What this means is there's lots of people, like 20, 30 people who are sending a message for one single housing, which means that the chances of you getting one are quite small. So this is why you need to be always on these websites, and when someone posts a new place, you need to be the first one to click apply, because in general they are going to be bringing the first 5 to 10 people for the viewing. Now that we have cleared the housing website, which is the main option that you have, let's look into Facebook groups. And probably this is gonna sound a bit weird to you, because when we moved in here from Romania, we didn't know that Facebook groups are a thing here. But actually in the Netherlands, Facebook groups are very popular and very common. And if you're searching up housing Amsterdam, for example, you're gonna find probably 10 to 20 different groups with over 50,000 people in them. Which means that there's a lot of different apartments posted there, but that doesn't mean you need to trust all of them. Because of the percentage of scammers on Facebook groups is very high. Like I would say, I don't know, 2 out of 5 listings, 3 out of 5 listings are probably scams. And you can already find and figure out which one is a scam by the listing name, checking for the guy and or the girl when their Facebook was created. If it was created like 1 month before and they have no friends, or they are part of like 100+ different groups already, you probably are talking to a scammer. And when you're going to talk with them, you're going to see that their English is quite poor, which is one of the main things you need to look out for. And if they're asking for any type of contract signature, any type of money, also if you're seeing like apartments that are listed for 600, 700 euros and they look like 12 to 1300 euro apartments in general, probably those are scams too, because people are not stupid in the Netherlands. They want to get as much money as possible if they can. Now, what are the benefits? Because we have talked about this as being very sketchy. To be honest, there's a lot of houses, a lot of apartments, a lot of different rooms that are listed here. And also in general, the prices are lower. And what really happens here in general is that people who are living there like as tenants just put it up on Facebook when they are moving out to find someone for the landlord, so they don't need to pay for a housing agency cost to make like the whole viewing process. Also, one other benefit is that you have many different contract lengths. What this means is that you can either rent for like a month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, like there's the whole range, because there's many different situations in which people are trying to find someone. But of course, the downside, again, a lot of scammers, very high competition, and again, you need to be really persistent. Always be open on Facebook, always have notifications on. You need to put in a lot of work. And now lastly, there's one last resource that I would recommend you use if you're trying to find housing. And this is contacting the university you are going to. The percentage of situations in which this happens is quite low, but sometimes actual universities have housing like flats that they can give to students in case they are in terrible situations. Also, what I want to tell you is that if you think that this was a bit difficult for you to understand again, and you would want a PDF with all of the information in one place and even more details that I wasn't just able to get into because the video is already so long, you can go on our website called findstudenthousing.nl and check out the ebook there. So thank you for watching our video. Subscribe because we want to get to 1,000 subscribers sometime in the future. And please watch the next video that's coming up, I think here.